Ego does not make people evil. Instead, it operates quietly, rendering highly intelligent, decent individuals completely blind to their own destruction. The force eroding marriages, stalling careers, and limiting human potential rarely stems from malice. It is driven almost entirely by a desperate, unyielding need to always be right. We develop this psychological armor to protect our identity, yet the exact mechanism designed to keep us safe is secretly orchestrating our ruin. To understand why, we have to look at how humans evolved to perceive status. In ancient tribes, being proven wrong meant losing standing within the group. A loss of status often led to exile, and exile meant literal death. This ancient dynamic is hardwired into the brain. At the center sits the amygdala, acting as a primitive, hypersensitive threat detector, constantly scanning for danger. When you enter a modern intellectual disagreement, whether across a boardroom table or in your own living room, logical processing gets bypassed. The brain interprets contradictory information as a direct assault, triggering this exact ancient alarm. Neurologically, your hardware cannot distinguish between a bruised ego and a physical predator. It reacts to a critical comment with the same chemical panic as a death threat. This biological misfire explains why we fight so viciously over objectively insignificant details. The stakes feel lethal, even when the topic is meaningless. We are attempting to navigate complex modern relationships using a brain wired for brutal, life-or-death tribal combat. Once that threat response is triggered, rational thought shuts down completely. The brain begins to rapidly alter reality, employing cognitive biases to protect the ego at any cost. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman's research maps this exact process. He observed that when self-image is threatened, the mind will actively construct a distorted reality, selectively filtering out facts that prove it wrong. As the distortion worsens, behavior escalates into intense defensiveness. Carl Jung categorized this under the concept of the shadow, parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. Jung identified a mechanism called projection. Rather than admit we are flawed or incorrect, we unconsciously take our deep insecurities and project them onto others as malicious faults. This creates a closed, unbreakable psychological loop. The ego is never at fault, and the individual becomes perfectly insulated from any need for self-reflection or accountability. The tragedy here is profound. Successfully winning an argument through cognitive bias means you have actually lost your grip on objective reality. At work, the inability to accept feedback and the compulsion to outshine leadership act as a silent toxin, destroying career mobility. The damage at home is even more severe. People will fiercely defend a minor technical point, winning a Tuesday night domestic argument at the direct cost of deeply eroding their partner's trust. Navigating away from this requires understanding a psychological pivot, the difference between ego and genuine self-respect. As clinical psychologist Jordan Peterson outlines in his personality frameworks, ego is loud. It requires constant external validation through dominance. Genuine self-respect, however, is quiet, stable, and entirely internally validated. This exposes the ultimate paradox. In its violent, desperate fight to protect the self, the ego guarantees the individual ends up completely isolated and alone. We often mistake loud, highly defensive, and volatile behavior for power. To the untrained eye, aggression looks like strength. Psychologically, it reveals the most fragile minds in the room. The biological override to this internal fragility is emotional intelligence. Psychologist Daniel Goleman's research shows that emotionally intelligent people appear perfectly calm under pressure, not because they lack passion, but because they have literally trained their prefrontal cortex to overpower their primitive amygdala. True, intimidating psychological power does not look like explosive dominance. It looks like absolute stillness while under attack. Achieving this stillness is entirely possible. It starts with a foundational psychological concept articulated by psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl, the space. Frankl observed that between every external stimulus, like a perceived insult, and our response to it, there lies a microscopic space. In that brief gap, we hold our entire power to choose. To control the ego, you must actively force this space to widen, freezing your reaction before a single word escapes your mouth. Thousands of years before modern neuroscience, the ancient Stoics understood this mechanism perfectly, framing it as the ultimate human achievement. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius realized that ultimate power is never about bending the external world to agree with your opinions. True sovereignty is achieving absolute mastery over your own mind. The ego will happily sacrifice your entire future just to win a fleeting moment. Self-awareness means accepting that sometimes you have to be willing to lose the argument so you can win your life.